You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
All right, what's good, everybody? Presented by Betano. It's time for the Wednesday edition of Leafs Morning Take. It's Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill, and finally some Maple Leafs hockey to talk about. I was talking to you off air last night. There's just not much cooking in Leafs Nation. Just 2 games in the next 12 days here. So I'm excited to actually talk about a hockey game tonight.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's we talked about it yesterday. Bit of a tough test for these guys. They're going to be no stranger to that coming down the pike here. They've got the most difficult schedule in the NHL to finish out the season, and starting here with a wagon right now in the Winnipeg Jets. They've been buzzing. They don't allow a lot of goals, so I mean our offensive firepower is going to have to do their thing for sure today if they're going to get a W.
Definitely going to dive into this home and home with the Winnipeg Jets. There's some Ryan Reaves conversation we got to get into. Tyler Bertuzzi's not with the team. Joseph Woll is back skating, which is a pleasant, storyline, obviously narrative. He hasn't played since December 7th, so we're almost approaching 2 months. And as somebody who's coming back from that injury, could tell you it takes a while, but we'll get into that conversation coming up with Joseph Woll. We'll look at the standings as we normally do on Wednesday, but some significant news across the wire this morning. Expansion. Here we go again with this conversation. Where do you stand on expansion? I don't think we've ever talked about that before.
Yeah, I want to make sure there's no teams that can't support a team. And if you can support a team, it's good. But I don't want to water down the product. I don't want to water down the league. I think it's a very prestigious thing to be able to make that league. And I mean, if you go back to when the WHA was competing against the NHL, there was a ton of teams and the talent wasn't as good. And they figured it out, obviously, but put teams where they deserve to be, where fans want them, where they're going to support them. And, don't put them in Phoenix.
Well, that's the thing is like, okay, so that's one part of the conversation. And the story is that Smith Entertainment Group, owners of the Utah Jazz, have asked the NHL to initiate an expansion process to bring a team to the state. So that would make a 33-team league. The NHL has put out a news release already saying, thank you, we're looking into it. I mean, what else are they going to say? But I think it's got to make sense. I think to your point, it has to make sense. And for me specifically, I look at a couple teams around this league and I wonder if they should even be there. So I think you have to figure out that situation before you bring new teams into the conversation. Having said that, as we know by now, everything is about money. If Utah pays up, they're probably going to get a team, and we're probably going to be looking at a 33-team league in the next couple of years. But I think it's obviously a fluid type situation. But I think you, to your point, you have to be crystal clear this thing is going to work. And I mean, it's sort of come out of nowhere here too.
Yeah, I know Utah, like their population, how bad do they want one? Obviously an ownership group's going to do their due diligence and not, spend that kind of money on something that's going to fail. You'd think they're smart businessmen, but it does throw things off. We got an 8-conference setup, half the teams get into playoffs. It works really nice. It's nice and crisp now ever since, Vegas and Seattle kind of rounded out that West, but I don't know. Utah, I would like to see another Canadian team. I would like to see, if it's not working, and I don't know the numbers lately, I've kind of fallen out of following that, but with Phoenix, like, is the team's escrow still floating that goddamn thing? Like, it's playing out of the Mullet Arena. It's just embarrassing. Like, if you want to do that, I'd be totally in favor of like a swap or something so you can keep the 32-team league, but inevitably they're going to do what they do. I just hope they get it right.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like I don't want to water down the rosters. Not that I think the rosters are watered down. I understand it's a cap league, but the last expansion was kind of like gray. Obviously, teams learned a lot from the Vegas expansion. Seattle a bit different, and yeah, they've had a lot of success in this league. But I think the further you go, or next thing you know, you're at like 36 teams. How watered down are those rosters going to be? And my concern, how volatile the crease has become in the NHL, Rosie, where teams are going through their 4th and 5th string goalies. Imagine there's another organization, maybe 2 more organizations. What's that going to mean? I mean, are we going to see E-Bugs sign full-term contracts with their teams now? It's crazy.
I don't know. Time will tell, but yeah, there's less to go around. There's more. It's more watered down. The potential for that is certainly high, and we'll see what comes of it. I mean, like I said, I haven't had my finger on the pulse. I used to follow that a little bit closer with the numbers and the behind the scenes stuff that were related to the CBA and hockey related revenue and all that type of revenue sharing stuff. But we'll see. I just hope it's not a complete money grab for the NHL. Like their eyes get big when they see the
Yeah.
expansion ticket, and what are they going to do with the expansion draft again, and all the things like you mentioned. It's interesting, and again, I just hope that they get it right, and it's not, you don't look back in 3 years and look at the league and say, well, it's not a better league. It's not a more prestigious league. Just the ownership group got an extra tens of millions of dollars in each one of their pockets. That's the only thing that changed. So hope that's not the case. But if they are talking about expansion, that is a good thing. We're not talking about folding teams and teams shutting down shop as much. It's a positive thing for the game and for the league if you're talking about expansion and getting into new markets and the game growing. So you got to look at it from that point as well.
Alcohol consumption would not be good. We know the old Mormon situation in Utah, and the alcohol situation would not be great for games. And it just brings back bad memories from Leafs Nation, where the Leafs wanted to keep Alex Kerfoot so damn bad. Even made a trade protection deal with Pittsburgh to get Jared McCann. Of course, McCann's now in Seattle, and he's a perennial 35, 40 goal scorer. It's tough looking back at some of the decision making, especially the first go around, Rosie, with Vegas, where you're like, man, oh man, had they made some better decisions, I think there could be some insulation for the big boys now in Toronto.
Yeah, hard to say, man. What
Yeah.
happened? It's a weird situation. I mean, that very first draft, they had two um, to go to be that good off the bat. I mean, I understand you don't want to be, who came in was just a struggling team, like maybe Atlanta or something. I can't. Or no, they moved. Can't remember the last
Minnesota.
expansion. Yeah, that's just a complete struggle. But they moved like a pure expansion team with an expansion draft, and I don't want them to struggle and be garbage. I don't think anybody wanted that, but to
Yeah.
run like to the Stanley Cup Finals might be
I
like a
know.
little bit aggressive. But I think they've done it enough times now where they can figure out what works and what didn't, and I feel like they got it right the last time. And it's interesting seeing who's protected, seeing who's not, seeing this whole new team, like a 20+ man roster of guys you're used to seeing on all spread out across the league, and all of a sudden they're all in this brand new uniform you've never seen, new logo, new team. It is interesting, it's exciting, and again, I hope it at the end of the day, after the couple of years of it settling down, that it helps the league and makes it better rather than the potential of being watered down.
Well, the big thing, obviously, as we move on to is like expansion has changed so much because these groups are paying so much money that the NHL sort of owes them, and that's why you're seeing them be with a level playing field right off the bat. Where back in the day, the fee wasn't as high, and it's like here you have an NHL team, but you're starting from the bottom. That's no longer the case, as you referenced. I
Yeah.
mean, you're a perennial contender right away with the way the rules are set up. You look at Vegas, you look at Seattle, so fascinating times ahead for the NHL. I just hope they're very, very strategic with this because I already think to a degree, it's a bit watered down in terms of the rosters. And I think if you add even two more teams, one more team here, potentially with Utah, I just think it becomes a bigger situation, bigger conversation in the league. But nevertheless, at least something to document, I think, over the next couple of years. At the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, at the Leafs Nation 401. If you're watching on YouTube right now and are not subscribed, I don't know what you're doing. At the Leafs Nation 401, once again, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcasts, and make sure to leave us a review and a 5-star rating, and we'll love you for life. Brought to you by DoorDash. It's time for the appetizer. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off up to $10 in value and zero delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. When you download the DoorDash app and enter code NATION25, that's code NATION25 in uppercase, 25% off your first order with DoorDash. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change. Terms apply. So it's the Leafs and Jets, the front end of a home and home. Game 2 will be on Saturday in Winnipeg, Hockey Night in Canada. That would be great. But the big story here, as we speculated upon the last couple of days, Rosie, Ilya Samsonov will start making back-to-back starts for the first time since December 9th and 11th. A 4-0 win against Nashville, a 4-3 OT loss, JT 1000 against the Islanders. Again, every game, I think we're going to say this with Sammy, but it feels like the biggest game of his career in this one.
Yeah, I think less so than the last two, but come off of that win, you're playing strongly. Whatever you did and found during your little hiatus there has produced at least 120 minutes of pretty good goaltending, and that's all you can ask for. So, right on, Sammy. Good job. Good to see. Continue doing that. Is all you can say, right? He must be in a little bit better of a place. I bet you the pressure's come off a little bit, but every game day, yeah, you don't want to revert back to the kind of play that you were playing at the beginning of the season. So, I wouldn't say it's the biggest game of the year for him. If he has a stinker, then the next time he gets in might be. But how long is his leash at how many bad performances in a row until they say, "Kate, we can't rely on Sammy. It's official. He doesn't have it. He's not going to be our goalie. He's not taking us deep. He just doesn't have it this year." I don't know what that answer is, but I don't see a reason to talk about it since he's played, two solid games. Looks very good. Looks like whatever was going on mentally, he's been able to overcome and execute, and we just hope it continues tonight.
Yeah, definitely want to see growth, I think, when it comes to Samsonov. And I think the big key is what you brought up there, where it's like you let in a goal. It's inevitable. And I think this is what plagues goaltenders, whether they're 5 years old or 35 years old in the NHL. It's like, how do you recover after surrendering a goal? And I think that's the big thing I've noticed with Sammy this year is like he'll let a goal in, it's the end of the world and you can't move past it. And I think it hampers his play for the rest of game and the next games, and it just gets out of control. And that's exactly what happened. I think he had a bit of a, unfortunate to say, like a nervous breakdown. And I think that's the biggest difference. I mean, knock on wood that we've seen these two appearances since he took his bit of a sabbatical there, is that it hasn't looked like it's affected him as much, and he's not swimming and try to do too much out there. I mean, we're neither of us are goalies, but I think that's the noticeable difference is how much more quiet he is in there, because we've seen him at bits and pieces as a Maple Leaf. Like, I mean, he has been a really, really strong goalie. And when he is, he's really quiet.
Yeah, and I mean I liked hearing what Jamie McLennan Noodles said on our show yesterday is kind of confirmed that to me as well. And there's a guy that knows goalie inside and out, but yeah, quieter, not sliding around, the confidence you can see it. It's tangible with his body language. You can see it you can see their eyes behind their masks on what they're kind of feeling and looking, and it's a calm presence. And I noticed that last year when he was playing well. I noticed that with Joseph Woll. It's just a big, square, positional look to the guy when he's playing, during play, after play. You can just see it. It's a confidence thing, and other players show that too. But there's a lot of eyeballs on the goalies, and it's the one guy in that position. It stands out a lot more. And when he was struggling, I mean, I notice it as they're scrambling more, they're sliding around, they're
Yeah.
they're they're kind of spinning to get to places, and then that makes them start to look around and be a little bit jittery, and they're not totally comfortable. And he has certainly looked comfortable the last two games. I'm absolutely not surprised that they're going to him again against the Jets here. I think if he gets a win, he'll be playing on Saturday as well. So we will see what happens here. But yeah, it's going to be, on the back of him for a certain amount of time. I think the team defense is going to have to help him out a lot as well, and play a tightly knit, structured zone defense that doesn't allow a whole shitload of chances against the guy. Help him out a little bit, and when you got the puck, go north and do your thing. We've got the firepower. I mean, that is the strength of this team, is scoring goals. So, as much as the Winnipeg Jets have been playing solid defense, I want to see these guys be able to break through, show your talent, show the money that you make is for a reason, and light these guys up tonight.
Just some news from the morning skate. As we speculated upon yesterday, Tyler Bertuzzi is out. He won't play. He and his wife are expecting their second child. So automatically, depth will be tested, obviously. But massive game for Nyes, Holmberg, and Robertson. Those are the three guys I'm looking at, right? Because they're on the left side. You take Bertuzzi out. I know he hasn't been great, but I think it'll challenge the depth. But I think it's a good challenge. Like, I want to see what these kids have. Nyes has had some flashes as of late, and obviously, Holmberg's been hot, and Nick Robertson's still trying to find it. I know everybody likes to make a conversation, 9 goals in 26 games or whatever it is, but this is a real opportunity for a guy like Nick Robertson, I think.
Yeah, and he's been playing well lately. He's been getting on the score sheet. I don't know, what is it, 4 and 7 or something
Yeah.
around that. around that number. And he looks confident out there. He's a guy that can score, and he needs to do it at a certain type of consistency in order to say, no, I am an NHL player. No, I can be here long term and help out this organization. And he hasn't quite done that yet. And I don't think that's panic button mashing time or anything, but it does change the conversation with him. And it has, all of a sudden we're talking about him as trade bait. And do we look at him as a different light? Is he any longer a blue chip prospect? Like, it's kind of, it's unfortunate for the players how fast that happens. You come up as this 20, 21-year-old kid, and by the time you're 23, it's like the ship has either sailed or you've proven yourself. It's a small window. And, sometimes guys seize that, take advantage. Other times guys take a little while to develop, and then all of a sudden they gotta battle and prove themselves even more so. But an opportunity like this is a good time to solidify yourself, and I'm sure Nick Robertson's aware of it. You talk about Holmberg and some of these other guys, they step up as well. Like, it's just odd to me. Like, Holmberg can be a guy that's in the minors, a bubble guy, a call up, kind of a fourth line guy, then playing on the top line. It's like, well, who is this guy and what do you expect from him? Like, what are your expectations? I understand throwing a guy a bone and saying, here's an opportunity to see what you can do with it. I'm all for that. But I think this team now at this point in the season needs to figure out, what is our depth? What is our lineup? Who has what role, and what are the expectations of each guy? Every guy can't go out there and say, well, this might be the night I get 2-1 and I'm the new star in town for a couple of weeks. Like, why are you in this league? Why did we draft you or sign you? What are the expectations from you on that depth chart? Here's your line. Here's your role. Here's your ice time. Now go with it and make a real hockey team out of this. And today is a night where someone might be able to step up and say, this is what I do.
It really is fascinating, too, when you look at it, because you look at some of the upper echelon elite teams in the league. It seems like every player, every line knows what they bring to the table. And then conversely, you look at the Leafs. I mean, Holmberg's a perfect example where we all think he's a fourth liner. He's always on the fourth line. All of a sudden, he's a top six player for like a month span, right? And I think it goes back to the whole identity thing. This team has no idea what it is or what it's playing for, or like the idea of like what's the goal out there, right? I think in terms of identity, the Leafs don't have an identity, man. Like it's fascinating, I think, when you look at it from that perspective, because that's been the big thing with Sheldon Keefe. It's like, let's jumble up the lines. They've tried everything. I mean everything. And it's the same conversation we had last season too with the lines, right?
Yeah, and I would say it's done to a fault. The fans that watch this team every single day and people that report on it, they don't have a clue what to expect with lineups and lines. And I remember, like, good teams and good coaches, they know what they want. They see it in their head on how a team is going to operate, and they get those players on the team that facilitate that. And then once they're there, nothing's perfect. Sometimes you gotta, you gotta groom a guy a little bit and build him up, and maybe a guy needs to step up his game and focus a little bit more offensively to play with certain players. Maybe a guy needs to dial it back a little bit and realize that you're not going to be, the number one offensive guy on the team that we look for, and you got to keep it a little simpler, be a little bit more of an energy power forward guy, and get it deep and bang the body a little bit. But ultimately you're sitting down with players throughout the season, a good coach will be, and say, what are you seeing out there? What do you notice on video? What would you like more of? Playing with this guy, how does it feel, that guy? And you just start to work with the guy, and then by 6 months into the season, hopefully you've built this team that runs on all cylinders, that covers all the bases that a hockey team needs throughout 60 minutes to win a hockey game against a good hockey team. And I just don't feel like they're doing that. I just feel like they just keep winging names on the fucking board and saying, fingers crossed that this is going to work. Hopefully we find magic. Oh, we just called up Holmberg. He's been in the minors, most of the year. But no, we're going to play him with Marner and Matthews. Like, what are you looking for? What do you try? Like, what do you hope to find? Because anybody can do that. Anyone can be at the helm of the Toronto Maple Leafs and just start winging names in the lineup and shrugging your shoulders and watching, saying, I hope something catches fire here. And that's kind of my one knock. One of my one knocks on Keefe is that I just don't feel like you're moving towards having this team that knows what they're doing.
You made some headlines on Tuesday morning on TSN 1050. Here are some quotes. I think they're exposed all the time with their mentality. And to me, that does come down to coaching. They have the opposite identity of a team with a weak defense. And I was reading that thread, and a lot of people agreed with you. I mean, that was a direct shot at Keefe, and nobody's really done that so far in this market. So kudos to you, Rosie.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at like everyone says our problem is, we don't have enough defense. Everyone's talking about the trade deadline. We need a defenseman. Are we going to get Tanev? Can we get, Hanifin? Can we get all these different guys? Because our defense isn't good enough. Our defense isn't good enough. Morgan Riley's back there on his own. He's an offensive defenseman, and he looks, he's our number one guy, and he looks completely lost in the D zone sometimes, and we get scored on. So to know that and then to have them play the style of play that they do, it's like if your weakness is your defense, you think you'd play a system that helps your D out, that has the forwards back, that has really responsible centermen that are focused on making sure we get possession before we start thinking offense. And those guys are stretched out in the O zone and winging it through the middle, and cheating a little bit with blowing by a D-man looking for that odd man rusher, the breakaway. And it's just like, how is that your mindset when you know your struggles in the back end? And I think I'm not alone, obviously, in Leafs Nation when I address that fact.
To me, it feels like the Leafs, like they always exercise patience. I think you look at some other teams, they don't care. They're going to make a change when they make a change. Do you feel like it's the market? Do you feel like it's the heat of the Toronto market where sometimes like they extend stays longer than they should? Like again, I'm not taking anything away from Sheldon Keefe. They can get out of this bit of a hole they're in right now. But like it always feels like Toronto takes longer than most teams. Maybe I'm just reading it improperly, but like it feels like Toronto takes longer to like make decisions like that. Why do you think that is?
It's hard to say if they do or not. I think that when you do make a change, it's so highly scrutinized that you would
They don't
probably be
want the smoke.
benefiting yourself to take a minute and to make sure you get it right. There's so many people, with their hands in the pot, and I know with ownership and management on every team, there's enough people, but Tree Living and Shanahan, and how much is Tenenbaum involved, and the
True.
ownership group, and how many of those talking heads up in the brass up there have their hand in their opinion on things, and you're having your big board meetings, and that when you make the slightest decision, that the whole city just reverberate through the whole place. And that's the reality of being in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. But if they do take a little longer to do something, you can understand why, based on the fact that it's going to be so highly scrutinized. You want to make sure you get it right.
Well, for example, I mean, not to correlate this to the NBA, but like the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis and all that, like they hired Adrian Griffin, who came from the Raptors, I believe, in the offseason. They're like 30-13, and they fired their coach. They just weren't happy with what was going on, right? And the Leafs are
Wild.
that type of team where every year they're in the conversation, and they're a bit dissimilar too, because Milwaukee won the title a couple years ago. And I just think sometimes like the decision isn't made when it needs to be made. And I think we talked about the Oilers being that team where it's like, wow, look what that Bolt has done for the Oilers. They're 24-6 in 30 outings with Chris Knobloch. They won 14 in a row. And I mean, you've been in a room. Sometimes that's all you need is just a fresh voice, a new face, and it ignites the team. And I wonder the longer we go on here, and it's not like there's other candidates out there that can't do the job. Like there's some really quality candidates out there, and I just wonder on a daily basis why they don't want to make the decision to do something substantial. But maybe they're reading it differently. Like that's my concern. Are we not watching the same team, Rosie? Like why do you and I agree? Why do a good majority of the fan base agree? Why do a lot of the media say the same thing? And it's like the team feels differently for some reason.
Yeah, well, relationships and pride, ego,
Yes.
those things take a lot. I mean, they are closer to it. They could possibly and potentially see things. We only get to see the interviews and the game on TV. They're in the meetings, they're having dinners and breakfast with these people, and what they're saying and where their mind's at and their philosophy. We don't know what that is. So you can take that with a grain of salt as well. They're more in the know than we are. But I do know what you're saying. Like, it just seems like more of the same, and it seems like the
Mm-hmm.
problems that they have are like not being addressed, which is frustrating. And if I had a big red button on my desk right now, that I could press and get Joel Quenneville to be the coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I would mash that button right now. I think there's a guy who can take a team, put it together to play the kind of hockey that can win a Stanley Cup, get the most out of your talent, but also have like extremely responsible people on the ice. Like, I don't think Patrick Kane in their heydays was he was working his bag off. He was skating like crazy. He was defensively sound. I mean, some people might argue with that, but I mean, him and Jonathan Taves, he got the most out of those guys to play a certain style. They had big D man. I understand it's a different roster, but I feel like that guy would, first thing he would do is like, we need to figure out who the fuck we are, because this team doesn't have a clue. Like, what lines are you running? What roles are these guys trying to perfect throughout an 82 game season? They don't have a clue, because the guys on the Marlies are playing on the first goddamn line. It's just, it's weird. So I am not totally thrilled about that. And I also think that if you do want to make a change and make something out of this season, that shit doesn't happen overnight necessarily. So, shit or get off the pot. And it seems like they are just sitting there not doing a whole lot of changes. So maybe they got something up their sleeve and they believe in this group. And I just know that it's going to take something different than what they've done to make a run in the playoffs this year.
Patrick G. Mafia writes in, he's had no goalie, guys. I think that's a lazy excuse. Like, it really is a lazy excuse. I think when you look at the personnel, the players on the roster, yeah, they have some faults in the blue line, but we have seen points in the past where Michael Hutchinson has been this team's number one, and they've been able to do their thing out there. I just don't think we're seeing the response that a team in this type of position, I should say, should be responding. And
Is he talking
again,
about the
I've
Oilers
said
getting
this so many.
goaltending?
Pardon me.
Is he talking about the Oilers getting goaltending?
No, he's talking about the Leafs. Like, the Leafs are not getting goaltending. That's why they're sucking, kind of thing.
I just don't see a lot of games where the team is playing fantastic and they
Yeah.
score 4 or 5 and the goalie just lets them down every time. Like, I more often not see a goalie standing on his head and it's a 2-1 hockey game and it's like, can you break this game open? Can you get the lead? No, they score last minute on, a frantic D zone, fucking 1 minute of D zone time, and they finally score after the whoever stands on their head for quite a bit of the game, and then they go into overtime and do something dumb and lose a game, and we're sitting there going, that game was ours if our guys just go and win it 100%. Like, that happens more often than not.
Yeah.
So I agree with the lazy excuse on goaltending. I think we've got fantastic goaltending out of Woll. We've got it out of Jones. We've gotten it in the past, not so much this year, out of Sammy. Like, I think it's a team mentality thing way more than it is just like, go get UC Saros in there and all our problems are solved. No chance.
Look, it's unfair again to compare it to Vegas, but go look at that roster that won the Stanley Cup. There's some good players, but are they barn burning players, for a lack of a better term? No. Yeah, they had 2 stud defensemen. I get that. But I mean, when you pay those 4 guys that amount of money, when you have the type of players on your roster, it's all about system. And again, I'm not Mr. X's and O's. I've never played at a high level, but I think you look at some other teams, there seems to be a response, Rosie, when they're scrutinized. And I just don't see that response this time around. Again, that could change, but then they can flip the script next week. Again, I like to bring up the first week of 2024. I was feeling pretty damn good about this team. I thought they were in a good spot. They beat the LA Kings. I know they beat some inferior opponents. And now it's like back to square one. And next thing you know, you run at a racetrack. It's a very, very peculiar position they're in right now, man. Like, Tampa won again last night. We're going to get to the standings, but these games are so important. And we talked about Winnipeg's been red hot. They lose to Boston the other night. And you have to find a way to squeak out victories now. And I just don't know if they're in it, man. I really don't.
Well, time will tell, right?
Yeah.
The trade deadline, in this day and age, I mean, it'd be great to get some D-man or to get a Tanev. It certainly won't hurt, but I hope that no one thinks that, some savior or multiple saviors is coming in to change the entire identity and DNA of this team, because that's not how it works. I haven't seen this team be hot. They haven't gone on this 10-game run where it's like, holy smokes, have these guys ever figured out? And then, that isn't necessarily sustainable in the NHL. So that goes away. And then you're like, okay, what were we doing when we were doing that? Because that is the formula to do it. It's always been win 2, win 1, lose 2, lose 3, win 1, lose 1, win 2, lose 2. Like, Jesus, man, it's not a recipe to go deep in the playoffs, man. You can't afford to be that inconsistent. You got to know what you are, and you got to be going hammer down into the playoffs and saying, we all know what our job is. We all know what's expected. We all know what we do when we play phenomenal hockey. Now let's go do it and get 16 wins. I don't think they have a clue. Whose line am I on? Who am I playing with? What do you want me to do tonight? Am I a checker? Am I an energy guy? Or do you want me to get 2-1 by, being pure offense and playing the power play? Like, I don't think anybody knows. And to me, I've never seen anything quite like that, where a team that's supposed to be slated as a Stanley Cup contender doesn't even know what to do with their personnel.
Yeah, they're looking for an identity. There's no doubt about that. Shots on goal, GA, and PPG can make or break your week, but don't overlook BPMM, Wendy's Bacon Portobello Mushroom Melt. Sure, it may not help you win weekly prizes with Wendy's and Daily Face-Off Fantasy, but unlike your predictions, it never disappoints. So try your luck, but don't push it, because the Bacon Portobello Mushroom Melt is only back for a limited time, and if you miss it, you won't get a second chance. Sign up for the Daily Face-Off today, sponsored by Wendy's and the Wendy's app. Did you catch this? Ryan Reaves, dude, activated from IR. So he missed 18 games, lower body injury. Do you know what the record was without Ryan Reaves?
No, what was it?
8-8-2, so 500, and that's the big reason why. But he returned to practice, mind you, as a full participant on January 2nd. You think this story got bigger than they anticipated?
Yeah, probably. Like, was he not even practicing with the team?
I think bits and pieces. He was technically injured, but he cleared himself, or was cleared, like the beginning of the month, man. We're talking 22 days ago.
Like, when you're a healthy scratch like that, and let's be honest, I don't see any game in the past, 15 games where I think Reaves would have gotten into the lineup. The writing was starting to be on the wall before he had that injury. But when you are a healthy scratch, it doesn't really matter if you're on the IR or not. You're not on a line in practice, right? You're on the extra line. Um, you stick around after and skate to get your reps in, because you're not getting your game day conditioning. And the same thing would happen as a scratch as it kind of would as a guy that's semi injured but still able to skate. So I think that's why it was like they didn't do anything with him. He's the last thing on their mind right now. And whether this formality of him being activated or not is taking place or not is kind of irrelevant. And it was probably just easier just to leave him on and continue on until something changed, until he says something in the media. Now people are talking about, oh shit, okay, yeah, activate him. Now he's activated. Like, it's nothing. It means nothing. It's just it doesn't mean anything. So he's still going to play on the non-line, on the fifth line. He's going to be a healthy scratch in my mind, except for maybe tonight with Bertuzzi being gone and the body
Playing.
situation. But yeah, he's not playing. So it's just, it doesn't matter to me. I don't see a reason why you'd take any of those players out that we mentioned to put in Reaves. When they signed him, a part of me was like, oh, cool, because it's a throwback. Same. It's, nostalgia wise, I feel like, oh, good. It's nice to know, that the league still has a little bit of that in it. But at the end of the day, he can't produce anything, including fighting, right? To justify being in the lineup. I mean, back when I was playing, I was in and out of the lineup, and their team had two heavyweights on it, and like, it was, you had to protect your players, and you had to make sure they didn't run the gamut. But like, Winnipeg's not going to come in here and beat the shit out of them and bully them and get in the goalies' faces and run the stars and blah, blah, blah. And you need a guy like that. So you don't need Ryan Reaves. So why would you put him in there? He's not going to skate. He's not going to be offensive. He's going to be a defensive liability. That's just the reality of this season for him. And I know he's not happy about it, but man, I had to come to the terms with that 12 years ago. And Ryan Reaves is still in the NHL on a 3-year deal. He should be goddamn thanking his lucky stars. And he could keep up in the league and has been part of good teams, but I think that's slowly passing him by. In this contract, I'm sorry, it's not going to go down well. I think his days are very numbered playing in a Toronto Maple Leaf uniform, and I probably could have told you that in September.
Yeah, I'm waving the white flag. Like, I'm not going that route. I got to stand by the fact that I like the signing. It just hasn't worked out. I mean, reading the tea leaves, Rosie, Sheldon Keefe doesn't want him there, man. If Sheldon Keefe wanted him there, he'd be horny, chomping at the bit to activate this guy. And the fact that 22 days after this guy was a full participant at practice, he's finally been activated, tells you all you need to know. I think this guy's destined for the AHL. And when and if that happens, it means they'll get 1.15 million in cap space. And I think a decision has to be made. Like, they got to make a roster move. To the best of my knowledge, is what I understand. They need to make a roster move once Bertuzzi is back, right? He'll be restored to the 23-man roster. So they'll have to make a move. And reading some stuff on social media, they can send one of their 3 waiver exempt forwards down, like Nyes, Robertson, Holmberg. But all 3 guys are like mainstays in the roster right now. I don't see why you would do that. Of course, there's always the Ilya Samsonov situation. Let's say he gets lit up. Maybe he's another guy who can go down because he cleared waivers. But to me, all signs point to Ryan Reaves being a member of the Toronto Marlies and say, I'll give it 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Like, it's unfortunate, man. I think this guy's got a great personality. We've talked to him a bit off air. Great dude. You could tell his teammates love him, but there's no fit for this guy on the roster. It was a colossal mistake. And it's the second biggest one because the John Klingberg one was the biggest one.
Yeah, they didn't work out too well, did they?
No.
I think they liked the idea of, I mean, when Tree Living said he's going to go out and get some guys, I wanted him to go out and get, some power forwards, some rugged, tough defensemen. I mean, we have our offense covered. Obviously, we have $50 million tied up in these offensive guys. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with holes on your defensive side of things. So if you can get some rugged guys that are tough to play against, that think defense first, that's what we need. And you go get a John Klingberg, who's a struggling offensive defenseman, for 4.5 sheets or whatever. It's like, well, like, guys, we want to keep the puck out of our net. We want to be more well-rounded. We're top heavy on the offensive side of the puck. So it was kind of frustrating to see that. And, you want to do some guys with some jam who can, drop the mitts if need be, but just be in guys' faces, protect your teammates, understand that role where, Ryan Reaves is pretty one-dimensional in that fact. And, the one thing that could save him is being very, very well liked in that locker room, being a glue guy, keeping the culture and the mentality and the attitude and the atmosphere, rate high on the list. And whether he's doing that or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, when you crunch the numbers like you did to start this segment, it looks like all signs are pointing to him probably going down for probably a substantial stint with the Marlies.
Oh, no, it's not going to be a stint. You're done. It's unfortunate again, and I have to credit his agent. I mean, he got him that contract, and the Leafs weren't the only team. Like, Minnesota was involved in that conversation too. But again, it's similar to Klingberg. This guy's played 21 games for the Maple Leafs, has a 3-year contract, and I think we're at a crossroads. We're at a point where they're gonna, put him on waivers. He's gonna get through. We all know this, and he's gonna go play for the Toronto Marlies, and you rid yourself of that. I mean, that's all you can do. It's unfortunate. I know the player didn't sign up for this, but it's a business sometimes. You know this.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I'm sure going into free agency, he's wondering, like, how many guys are going to want me? It's been a long time coming. He's been hanging on to the NHL and doing very well at that, man. I mean, the career he's had post 2015 is phenomenal. Like, how have you managed to stay in the league with the one-dimensional side of you? And if he was like a phenomenal skating tough guy, that would make some sense to me. But he keeps up and everything, yeah. But and he must have, again, he must be one of those guys that comes to Toronto and just can't do what he used to do. I mean, I'm sure to stay in the league in the past, I haven't looked at his plus minus in a while, but he's not a defensive liability. He's not getting scored on once a game. He's getting the puck deep, he's protecting it, he's creating energy, he's creating space, and he also has that layer of protection and intimidation, which has served him well. And then he comes here and not really anyone to fight. When he does fight, they're not the most overly outrageously dominant fights that he's getting in, where he's, the clear belt holder or whatever the hell you want to call it. And he's getting scored on every single night. Yeah. So it hasn't gone well for him. And the writing is on the wall, and putting him in the lineup is not going to produce more wins. So I agree with you. He should thank his lucky stars. He's got a 3-year deal. I think he absolutely robbed the bank. I would not have expected that coming into the free agent season for him, and I doubt he did either. And I'm sure he couldn't find a pen quick enough to sign that damn thing. But I think he's, he can look on the bright side and save some escrow by going down to the minor leagues and make a couple extra bucks on that last ticket that I'm sure he's going to sign.
Hey, the positive thing too, he doesn't have to go very far. Like it would just be around the corner from where I live. He'd still be in Toronto. I mean, there could be worse situations that you hit the bus to, but it's got to be a kick to the pills, especially Rosie, when you consider Ryan Reaves and where that conversation was 6 months ago, where this guy was like the talk of the town in free agency in Toronto to where it is now. You probably could have forecasted it, but it's you feel for the player a bit, like because we knew how excited the guy was to be a Maple Leaf. It just hasn't worked out, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. It was exciting to have a tough guy. And
Yeah,
again, it was like, well, how many guys are going to fight him? And I mean, it just wasn't. I know that he wanted to make a splash. Tree Living wanted to say, we're too soft. I remember, Austin Matthews getting ragdolled by Stamkos of all guys in the playoffs.
yeah,
How the
true.
the Tampa Bay Lightning came out and said, we're just going to run these pussies right out of the building. And that's exactly what they tried to do. And
Yeah.
nobody liked that who cheers for the Maple Leafs. It's disgusting to watch. It's embarrassing. So they go out there and get a guy to say, yeah, guess who's going to try that shit now? And I get it. But I also thought, like, this isn't, it's a team toughness problem. I keep going to the Florida Panthers. Like, they've got so many guys, it doesn't matter what line is out there, that don't put up with that shit, that are going to play that way themselves, that are going to have that little bit of bite in their game. And if anything hits the fan, those guys are all together, linked arms, saying, let's go take care of this bullshit. We had absolutely none of that. And I'm sorry about bringing in a one-dimensional heavy, as much as it hurts me to say, because I was literally that player. But it's not the answer to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's proven to be so now.
Definitely not working, that is for sure. The following segment is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Get custom ring building delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece Program and an unbeatable pricing policy. The holidays, we're just passing them, of course, but I think now's a great time to pick up on this. So don't forget to check out more information. Go to charmdiamondcenters.com. And Joseph Woll, by the way, on the ice for the optional skate this morning. Nowhere close, but I think it's consistent and positive news to see where he's at. And I crunched some numbers. December 7th is when he sustained the injury against the Ottawa Senators. So we're approaching almost 7 weeks. Like it's gonna be 2 months. February 7th. So I mean, this is great news that he's on the ice at least, because we really haven't seen him in quite some time here.
Yeah, shit, it almost would have been better if he did like tweak his knee or like tweak his MCL or even freaking tear it, man. I mean, you'd be back to ripping it up now. And this high ankle sprain, albeit once it's healed, you'd think it would be behind you. It just takes forever to heal, man. And I've never had it, so I don't know, but I just remember countless guys getting these high ankle sprains, and it's like, say goodbye to that guy, yeah, for 2 months, and you cross your fingers and hope for better. But and then if you do push it and try to make it, into a quicker return, you do it up again. Oh my God, you missed the better part of a season with a goddamn ankle sprain. So
Yeah.
I understand why they're taking their time, and it's nice to see him on the ice and moving and pushing off those posts and being in those goaltending positions that strain that particular part of your body. But man, it's like, let's get this guy back. Let's have a 1-2 punch. Let's be able to have a solid number one, and hopefully it is him, and go back and forth. And again, I think that just the fact that he's been out that long and he was playing the way he was when he went out just makes you realize how important Martin Jones has been to this team the last 8 weeks.
You ever had a high ankle sprain?
No, I never have. I just know guys on my team that have. It's often goalies, and they suck, I guess.
Dude, I was playing men's league, beer league, like maybe 5 years ago, and I got like tripped on a breakaway and all the weight fell on the ankle and you can feel it pop. But I could, and again, granted, they have pros like working after this, and I did physio once a week, but like the recovery was hell, where it took probably like 6 months for me to feel comfortable. And I think the problem you'll deal with late in the process is thinking your ankle is strong enough to withstand and be the same ankle that it was before. But I think that's the thing they have to make sure of. And granted, I think they have a perfect illustration in Timothy Liljegren. I think as Luc Fines is coming back. But that's the concern for me, is coming back too quickly, because Keefe said earlier today, Joseph Woll is progressing well. There's a hope, I should say, that he returns from the All-Star and he'll join their practice from after the All-Star break, which is excellent news. Like, he wouldn't call it imminent, but I think that's the final hurdles to make sure, like, you're not going to revert backwards here, right?
Well, that's good because I didn't think they
Yeah.
gave that much info. I hardly listen to
Yeah.
that shit because they don't give you anything. But that makes complete sense. He's probably almost ready now, but especially you look at the timeline,
Yeah.
given the All-Star break coming up, and they only have what 2-3 games in like two games in 2 weeks or something like that. Why on earth would you ever even think about pushing it? You never would. So I think that we could see, a return from All-Star break,
Mhm.
a good hard couple practices with some extra work before and after, and he just looks at Keefe and says, I'm 100%. There's nothing more I can do to get this thing ready. I'm healed, and then it's go time, baby, which is very exciting. I can't wait to see this kid back in net.
Yeah, just looking at the schedule post All-Star break / bye week. So the Monday following the All-Star break, they're home to the Islanders, home to the Dallas Stars on the Wednesday, then at Ottawa on the 10th, and then home to the St. Louis Blues on the 13th. I think ideally those are probably the two games I'm looking at. St. Louis the 13th, Philadelphia the 15th. They got a bit of a homestand, a 3-game stand, St. Louis, Philadelphia, Anaheim. If I had to put money on it, probably the 13th, 15th, 17th is what I'd be looking at. But you just have to tread water. You have to get there somehow, some way, right?
Yeah, and you will get there. That will be here before we know it. And that it won't be the first game after All-Star break. That second one might still want to get that week of practice in, right? And then I bet you he'll be ready to rock after that, whatever week that is you just mentioned. But it's exciting that there's actually a timetable now, and it sounds like he's as healthy as he could be at this point in time, according to what your projections are with that
Yeah.
kind of injury. And the fact that the All-Star game is coming up, I mean, if it wasn't, we might be even closer than we are otherwise. So that's a good sign to give him that extra little bit of time just because of that break. It's good timing wise to make sure there's no hiccups and not saying why the hell did we push it, or was he totally back to 100%. There's not going to be any of that because of the All-Star game. You're going to get that extra break and make sure he's ready to rock.
Rosie, it's Wednesday, so let's look at the Atlantic Division standings. And we talked about this earlier in the week. The Boston Bruins on complete fire yet again. They're now 13 points ahead of the Maple Leafs in the standings. The Leafs have a game in hand, but Boston at 67. The Florida Panthers at 60. Then you got Tampa at 55. The Leafs do have 3 games in hand on Tampa. Big win for the Lightning last night against the Philadelphia Flyers. So it just shows you the standings. Detroit's 1 point back. The Leafs have 2 games in hand on them. I think that's the key. The Leafs have games in hand on these teams, but it's one thing to have that. It's another thing to take care of business too, right?
Yeah, I always hate looking at the standings when there's, 3 or more games in hand. It just makes it so difficult to analyze and see where you're at. But games in hand don't mean anything if you don't win them. But there is, you got to keep that in mind when you're looking at that. And obviously that 3-team slant there, that Detroit, Toronto, Tampa Bay is where the battle is. And depending on, someone can go for a little bit of a run, or if some hiccup happens in Florida, you can start to make a push, and that's a good problem to have, is being close enough to catch Florida. But yeah, the games in hand, let's not forget, we've got a very tough schedule coming up, and say the break that one of those teams ahead of them goes on is when you're facing some dynamos in the league. It's going to be a tough task. So that's where they sit right now, and it's not where they wanted to be, but we've mentioned injury problems, some of the troubles they've had this year, and with consistency especially. I think they're looking to shore that up as much as possible, and just every night you got to get a point and just rattle those off, and hope for the best with the other teams and what they do. And you got to take care of those games in hand as well, which is no small task when you got the hardest schedule in the league.
By the way, the Leafs 10-8-4 since Joseph Woll went down. They've allowed 81 goals in 22 games. That's 3.68 per game. And if you were to tell me, man, on January 24th, the Leafs would be in a playoff spot by just 3 points, I would be freaking out. And that's where they're at, because you look 3 points behind them. It's New Jersey. It's the Islanders. Washington's at 50. So bottom line, they got to find a way here. You got to find a way to win this hockey game. They got 2 more before the All-Star break / bye week. The Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Rosie, tonight I'm looking at the captain, John Tavares. I thought he was much better against Seattle on Sunday. He's still pointless in 8. He's goalless in 9. I would look at that shot prop. I would look at an assist. Maybe that goal happens. I think JT has been the model of consistency in his career. This dam's about to burst, in my opinion.
I like it. You're looking to snap him out of that funk. I look at the money line and it's just like, how are we a minus 140 favorite
Crazy,
in
right?
this thing? It just makes it impossible to bet on your favorite team here because it's so fucking ridiculous. One of the top teams in the league who does not allow any goals, and we are just heavily favored anyway.
You won't fade them, and you won't fade the Maple Leafs. That's the big thing that you've hung your hat on, that fact that you won't fade the Leafs even when it makes too much sense.
I don't bet against the Maple Leafs. I could give a shit about winning a few bucks here and there on betting. I'll bet on other things. If the line is as disgusting as it is in this one, I will go to the player props, shop props. A little flyer if you want to take is Matthew Nyes. I think he's due to kind of have a little bit of a breakout. He's kind of seems like he's right there. And you could jump on him with a little sprinkle action too. But yeah, it'd be nice to see John Tavares break out, and it's a good play because he doesn't go very long like this. This is a career stretch for him. You would expect him to pop out of here anytime.
Yeah, they're wearing their Bieber Next Generation jerseys, so look out for that. I was laughing too. I don't know if you caught this on social media on Tuesday. The Oilers have some fucking chrome helmets going, like a blue
No,
chrome. Yeah, you
no,
didn't see
that's
that?
the no, that's the
Oh,
Vancouver
Canucks.
Canucks. I thought.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
Yeah,
right,
Canucks.
Canucks.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
saw. They're not as bad as the Kings, but I mean, when they go from those unis they were wearing on the weekend, like the
I
absolute
know.
classic black
Oh,
Vancouver Canucks skate logo ones with matte black helmets. Are you kidding me? The
so sexy.
un unchallenged best unis in the league, maybe in the history of the league. And then you go to the chrome flashy domes. It's tough to watch. It is what it is, though. Whatever you want to say about it. If the Maple Leafs ever did something that fucking stupid with that historic
Oh,
jersey
please don't.
uniform, I would lose my absolute marbles. I mean, the Bieber freaking throwbacks are bad enough, and that's fine to bring in the younger generation and stuff. But chrome helmets, I'll lose my shit.
Man, go back and look to the jerseys they wore, and producer Vic, maybe you can help me. They wore this during the pandemic, and I forget what the jerseys were called, but they were hideous. They were it wasn't a next gen jersey. I forget what it was called specifically, but it was a type of jersey the Leafs put out, and it was so damn ugly. I know the broadcasters hated it. Anybody in the chat, if you want to help me out with this, and they'll make me look like a fool. They had jerseys like 3 years ago where they were so ugly. They had gray in them, man. It made no sense. Made no sense
Mm.
why they had gray in those jerseys. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't need it. I'm so there with you. The Vancouver Canucks, like that is a legendary jersey. Just wear that every game and I'll feel happy about it, you know?
I know. What makes me think I was thinking a little while ago because I wasn't as involved in the Leafs. They weren't my favorite team growing up. But remember that like TML logo?
Yeah.
Remember that? And that was like their new kind of logo. Did people lose their bloody marbles in you must have been a little bit younger. It was probably around 2000 or something like that. And I remember like the stickers in the back of the guys' trucks and stuff like that, like this new logo. That must have been wild for them to never waver away from a Maple Leaf. And now all of a sudden they have this weird stacked TML logo. I bet you that made some noise.
Yeah, it definitely did. And thank you to producer Vic, always on the ball. The reverse retro jerseys. I think the initial reverse retro jerseys, go back and Google those, fucking hideous. But looking forward to this matchup tonight, Rosie, the front end of the home and home with the Winnipeg Jets. So we'll reconvene on Thursday for a recap, okay?
This Winnipeg Jets, they do not allow very many goals, so it's going to come down to our big boys to be smart enough to put it in the back of their net without risking filling hours. I'll be watching intently.
I would argue Winnipeg is due for regression. So we're going to jump on the Leafs
True.
tonight. Let's do it. That's Jay Rosehill at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, where you could subscribe. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast as well. Many thanks to everybody in the chat. You guys are red hot, fantastic. At the Leafs Nation 401 once again. Many thanks to producer Vic. That's Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga, and we'll talk on Thursday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at the Leafs Nation.